Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are joining us right now, you're probably the kind of person who appreciates when history throws a curveball.
Right? The unexpected stuff.
Exactly. We so often look back at historical figures and see them as these static, boring portraits.
Like a stiff black and white photograph.
Yeah. We assume their lives were simple or straightforward and just defined by whatever formal title they held. But our mission today is to completely shatter that illusion.
And we have the perfect subject for it.
We really do. Today, we are exploring the life of a cosmopolitan, multilingual woman who navigated these profound personal tragedies and then somehow ended up sitting at the very epicenter of intense political contradictions during the First World War.
While managing to leave this massive philanthropic legacy that, amazingly, still operates today.
It's wild. So our source today is a Wikipedia article detailing the life of Marie Galway, or as she was born, Marie Carola Francisca Rosalind Blennerhassett.
Quite the name.
Right, and she's generally remembered as a British women's rights activist and a charity worker. But honestly, that single sentence barely hints at the actual scale of her life.
No, it really doesn't. It's a phenomenal case study in quiet resilience. I mean, we are looking at someone who lived through entirely different eras, different identities even.
Yeah.
And she proves that lasting impact is so often born out of incredibly uncomfortable circumstances. Instead of just, being swept away by the historical currents of her time, she figured out how to build something permanent within them.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Starting right at her foundation. Because her childhood was anything but standard.
Definitely not standard.
She was born on January 5, 1876, in Mayfair, London.
And just to set the scene, Mayfair in the 1870s places her squarely in the absolute heart of the British Empire's elite.
Right.
Picture the cobblestone streets, the horse-drawn carriages, gas lamps. It's the absolute heights of Victorian high society.
But the thing is, her parents were not just standard aristocrats. They were intellectuals who gave her remarkably global perspective right from the jump.
Yeah, she was the only daughter of Sir Rowland Blennerhassett and Countess Charlotte Julia de Leyden.
Let's actually break down who these two people were, because it explains so much of her worldview later on. Her father, Sir Rowland, was an Irish baronet and a parliamentarian.
Right, and for those unfamiliar, a baronet is a hereditary title. Kind of like a knight who can pass the title down to his heirs.
Meaning he had significant land, real wealth, and a seat in the House of Commons.
Oh, yeah.
And then her mother, the Countess, was from Bavaria. She was a really respected biographer and historian in her own right, and both of them were recognized leaders of the English liberal Catholic movement.
Which is a fascinating movement in itself. I mean, the 19th century was this period of massive democratic and scientific upheaval.
Huge changes everywhere.
Right. And the liberal Catholic movement was essentially this intellectual effort to reconcile traditional Catholic doctrine with the modern liberal ideas sweeping across Europe. Her parents were right at the forefront of trying to bridge that ancient faith with modern progress.
And the way they met, it sounds like something out of a historical romance novel.
It really does.
They actually met while attending the First Vatican Council.
It was huge.
Yeah, a massive historic gathering of church leaders in Rome, right between 1869 and 1870. So you have this Irish politician and a Bavarian historian crossing paths at one of the most significant religious assemblies of the entire century.
So from the literal moment she was born, Marie was embedded in this pan-European, deeply intellectual environment.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is how this multilingual, cross-cultural foundation fundamentally prepared her for a life of connecting with wildly diverse groups of people later on. I mean, her education wasn't just confined to a governess in a London townhouse.
No.
She attended private schools across Germany, France, and Switzerland.
Just imagine having that kind of diplomatic passport before you even enter adulthood. I always think about modern kids today who grow up as, third culture kids.
Oh, right, moving from country to country.
Exactly. They develop this incredible chameleon-like ability to adapt to new environments. Marie was doing that in the late 19th century. She was completely immersed in the distinct cultures of continental Europe.
To the point where she read extensively in 6 different languages.
6?
Yeah, and when you're processing complex information, literature, history in 6 languages, your brain literally wires itself to understand multiple perspectives simultaneously.
Because you realize there isn't just one way to view the world.
Precisely. You understand cultural nuances deeply because you literally speak the language of the people you're interacting with. For Marie, international borders were entirely permeable.
But that adaptability was put to the test very quickly.
Yeah.
Her life moves into its first major pivot, and it happens when she's remarkably young.
Right.
On November 28, 1894, while she's still a teenager, she marries a French biologist named Baron Raphael d'Erlanger.
And this wasn't just some marriage of convenience for status. The Baron was an active scientist. He had a laboratory at the University of Heidelberg in Germany.
Which was a major hub, right?
Oh, absolutely. Heidelberg in the 1890s was a vibrant, cutting-edge hub of European scientific research and intellectual debate.
The contrast there is just striking. She goes from the aristocratic drawing rooms of Mayfair to this bustling German university town, moving in circles totally focused on biology and discovery.
And they settle into this life. They have 2 children together, a daughter and a son. It paints a picture of a really fulfilling modern chapter for a woman at the turn of the century.
It does. But it was tragically short-lived.
Yeah,
Just 3 years after they were married, in 1897, the Baron passes away.
it's devastating.
She is barely in her early 20s. She has a young daughter and a son, and suddenly this entire life she was building in Heidelberg just vanishes.
The profound grief and disorientation of that moment is hard to even overstate.
So she returns to England as a young widow.
And we have to remember, the societal expectations for a young widow in late Victorian England were incredibly rigid.
Very strict rules.
She would have been expected to wear heavy mourning black, completely retreat from the public eye, and basically just quietly rely on her family for the rest of her life.
Just fade away.
Fading into the background was essentially the mandated protocol.
But she rejects that script entirely.
Completely.
Instead of retreating into her family's wealth, she begins working directly with the sick and the destitute in England. And she doesn't just stop at, delivering food or basic care. She helped to found a committee to advise on legislation affecting women and children.
That is such a key detail. That specific pivot from charity to policy is a defining characteristic of her life.
How so?
Well, working with the destitute addresses the immediate, painful symptoms of a broken society, which is noble. But forming a committee to advise on legislation, that is an attempt to cure the disease itself.
Ah, I see.
She took all that pan-European education, all that intellectual rigor she inherited from her parents, and aimed it directly at systemic change. She recognized that the only way to permanently improve the lives of vulnerable women and children was to rewrite the actual laws that govern them.
So what does this all mean? Well, it tells us that Marie Galway possessed a rare kind of architectural thinking. She takes a devastating personal tragedy, refuses the passive role society tries to hand her, and channels her energy into structural advocacy.
She builds frameworks.
Exactly. And she is going to need every single ounce of that structural mindset for the era that comes next, which is arguably her most defining and definitely her most complicated chapter.
We are moving to the Australian years now, which present a completely different set of challenges.
Right. So in 1914, she marries Sir Henry Galway.
And almost immediately, she accompanies him to Adelaide because he has been appointed the governor of South Australia.
And for context for you listening, the governor is the representative of the British Crown. It's a role with immense social influence, heavy ceremonial duties, and significant political weight.
But consider the timing of their arrival. It's 1914.
Oh boy.
They step off the ship and into Government House just as the globe is plunging into the First World War.
Right. And Sir Henry's term as governor ran from 1914 to 1920. And this historical record shows it was highly controversial.
Yes, factually speaking, it was a very divisive tenure.
During the war, Sir Henry actively used his platform to stir up negative feeling against Australians of German descent. He was a vocal proponent of anti-German sentiment within the very state he was governing.
And looking at the political climate of the time, a governor stoking wartime hostility against a specific heritage group within his own jurisdiction created a deeply fractured society in South Australia. That's just the factual reality of his time in office.
Which brings us to a historical contradiction that is almost hard to even fathom.
It's unbelievable.
Marie Galway, the governor's wife, was half German. Her mother, the Countess, was from Bavaria. Marie was educated in Germany. Her first husband was a scientist at a German university. Her own foundational identity was intimately tied to the very culture her current husband was publicly and politically attacking from the steps of Government House.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the cognitive dissonance she must have experienced is staggering.
I can't even imagine.
I mean, Government House is the epicenter of state power and high society. As the governor's wife, she is expected to be the ultimate hostess, the smiling, supportive face of the crown.
Yeah.
Yet the man sitting at the head of the table is actively undermining her own maternal heritage.
Have you ever sat at a family dinner where someone is loudly railing against something that is fundamentally part of who you are?
It's awful.
Now multiply that tension by a literal world war. Put it on the front page of the newspapers and trap yourself in a sprawling colonial mansion.
The immense restraint and diplomacy it must have taken for her to navigate Adelaide's society during those years is just incredible.
And there is a timeline detail here that speaks volumes without a single quote or diary entry.
This is my favorite detail.
Marie Galway returned to England in January 1919.
Yes.
That is a full 15 months before her husband's term as governor ended.
And in an era where the political spouse was expected to stand dutifully by her husband until the bitter end of a posting, leaving over a year early is a massive, silent statement.
It really suggests a firm boundary was finally drawn. She removed herself from the epicenter of that political storm.
She did.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting, before she packed her bags, she didn't just hide away in her quarters feeling conflicted.
No, that wasn't her style at all.
Instead of letting the wartime hysteria or her marital tension paralyze her, she leveraged her unique position to build something remarkably tangible.
She threw herself into logistical mobilization. In August 1914, right at the onset of the war, she received a request from Lady Helen Monroe Ferguson.
Who was the wife of the Australian Governor General, right?
Exactly. And at her behest, Marie founded the South Australian Division of the British Red Cross Society.
And she didn't just serve as a figurehead on a fancy letterhead. She literally opened up the doors of her own residence. The South Australian Division was originally housed right inside the Government House ballroom on North Terrace.
I love that image.
Think about the spaces in your own life that are purely for show. Maybe a formal dining room or a pristine corporate lobby. She took a grand ballroom designed for chandeliers, velvet curtains, and elite socialization and completely upended it.
It became a grassroots logistical hub where volunteers gathered to sort and pack vital items for Australian defense personnel serving overseas.
It's such a brilliant subversion of the traditional decorative role of a governor's wife. She turned a symbol of colonial leisure into a factory of wartime utility.
And she didn't stop at packing bandages either. In 1916, she expanded her efforts significantly by opening the Lady Galway Convalescent Home at Henley Beach.
This facility was also known as a clubhouse for soldiers. And the rules she established for this home are a perfect reflection of her character.
They really are.
The home was designed for returning soldiers who needed a period of rest, which was verified by a standard medical examination. But the crucial detail is that it was open to soldiers of any rank.
And that egalitarian approach was definitely not always a given at the time. Facilities were very often segregated by officer and enlisted status.
Right.
By opening the doors to privates and infantrymen, the everyday citizens bearing the brutal physical and psychological brunt of trench warfare, she created a genuine sanctuary.
And the medical examination caveat? Ensuring no infectious or severe mental diseases, that was simply standard public health protocol for a general rest facility, right?
Exactly. It was just to ensure the safety of all the recovering patients.
The journey of that convalescent home is a testament to its structural importance. It was managed by the Army and Navy Department of the YMCA until September 1919. And then it was officially handed over to the governor of South Australia.
Which is highly ironic, considering Marie herself had already sailed back to England 9 months prior.
Right. But her creation was so vital to the state's recovery infrastructure that it seamlessly transitioned into a permanent public institution.
The physical footprint of that home lasted for decades. In 1946, the facility moved to Robert Street in Glenelg. The original buildings eventually merged with the Junior Red Cross home across the road, and it became the Lady Horror Ruthven Junior Red Cross home.
And the ripple effects of her structural thinking are still visible in the organization today.
Yes, they are.
Because Marie Galway founded the South Australian Division with such authority and effectiveness, a lasting tradition was actually born. Ever since her tenure, the wife of the governor, or the governor herself if a woman holds the office, has served as the president of the Red Cross in South Australia.
We discussed the intense, polarizing political rhetoric of her husband's time in office earlier. Yet, if you look at the enduring historical footprint in South Australia, it is Marie's organizational genius that survived.
Wow.
Her husband's speeches faded into the archives, but her ballroom packing center evolved into a permanent pillar of public health and disaster relief.
That is incredible. So Marie lived a long life after returning to Europe. She passed away on June 29, 1963, at the age of 87.
A very full life.
And when you look at the global recognition she received by the end of her life, it perfectly mirrors the cosmopolitan, borderless upbringing we talked about at the very beginning.
The honors she accumulated are a direct reflection of the sheer scale of her humanitarian logistics.
She was awarded the Médaille de la Reine Elisabeth from Belgium.
She received the Médaille de la Reconnaissance Française from France.
She was appointed a Dame of Grace of the Order of St. John.
And in 1926, she was made a Commander of the Order of the British Empire, or a CBE.
To receive medals from Belgium, France, and the British Empire is just the ultimate full circle. We started this deep dive exploring a girl born in Victorian London to an Irish father and a Bavarian mother who met at the Vatican. We followed her to a biology lab in Germany, through the devastating early loss of her husband, into the legislative halls of England, where she fought for systemic legal changes for women and children.
And then we watched her navigate the suffocating political contradictions of World War I Australia,
where she responded to anti-German rhetoric, not with despair, but by literally turning her colonial ballroom into a Red Cross headquarters.
Her timeline is dense with action, but underneath all those dates and locations is a really fascinating philosophical question to consider.
What's that?
Well, when we look at historical figures, particularly the spouses of powerful, polarizing politicians, we often view their charity work as just an expected duty, a polite hobby.
Right, part of the job description.
But Marie's story challenges that completely. It asks us to consider, is institutional philanthropy by a political spouse an act of pure, isolated altruism? Or is it, maybe even subconsciously, a form of political damage control? A way to balance the scales against a spouse's divisive legacy. When history places you in a deeply uncomfortable contradiction, much like Marie's half-German heritage in an anti-German household during a world war, how do you choose to channel that friction?
That's a great question.
Do you let the conflict define you, or do you build something that outlasts the noise like she did with the Red Cross? Can a legacy of healing ever truly be separated from the environment of conflict that necessitated it?
That is a phenomenal, thorny question to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away seeing history and perhaps the complexities of legacy a little bit differently today. Keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.